Oculogica was founded in 2013 by Dr. Uzma Samadani. She is a neurosurgeon at the Minneapolis Veterans Administration Medical Center and a brain injury researcher. Her lab has developed the eye tracking methodology you'll see tonight, and she serves as the company's scientific advisor. She is an associate professor in the Department of Bioinformatics and Computational Biology at the University of Minnesota with a graduate faculty appointment in neuroscience. She serves on the executive committee of the American Association of Neurological Surgeons Congress on Neurological Surgeons Joint Section on Neurotrauma and Critical Care. Dr. Rosina Samadani is Oculogica's CEO since 2015 and Uzma's sister. She has a bachelor's and master's degree in mechanical engineering from MIT and a PhD in biomedical engineering from Northwestern University. She lives in New York and has been described as a serial healthcare technology entrepreneur. Of the 4 companies she has led, she founded 3. Now, both of you are too young for this reference, yet I feel like a Cheers episode where I'm saying doctor, doctor, doctor. But let's start with you, Dr. Uzma. Most innovations are as a result of the need to solve a problem. What problem were you trying to solve with the EyeBOX?
Hi, thanks everybody. Thank you for inviting us to speak. So basically the problem that we were trying to solve was that we had a clinical trial for brain injury and we were trying to improve outcomes and we needed an outcome measure. And that's why we invented eye tracking. We were actually trying to figure out, our hypothesis was that people who were more brain injured would be less capable of watching TV or following objects on a screen, and people who were less brain injured would be more able to engage with the outside world. And what we found was that not only were we able to measure levels of engagement, but we were able to determine what was wrong with people's ability to move their eyes. So for example, if someone has restricted movement in the vertical plane, that tells you something about their cranial nerve 3 function. If they have restricted movement in the horizontal plane, that tells you something about cranial nerve 6 function. So we were surprised to find that we could actually figure out, sort of trace lesions back. If there was a problem with coordination, that meant medial longitudinal fasciculus, if it was in the horizontal plane, for example. So that's what we were able to do, was we were able to look at differences between movements of the eyes and figure out where in the brain the problem had occurred.
That's great. Now we're going to see an EyeBOX demonstration in a minute. I've had physicians say to me, if this is a legitimate objective concussion assessment, this would be fabulous. Is the EyeBOX legitimate, and how did you demonstrate to the FDA when you gained approval?
So I'm going to answer that question. I'm Rosina Samadani. Thank you, by the way, for having us. We really appreciate it. So when you go to the FDA with what we have, which is a Class 2 medical device, there are multiple classes of medical device. Ours is a Class 2 medical device, and that's based on the safety and risk assessment. There are multiple pathways that you can go to the FDA with, and you don't get to determine the pathway. The FDA determines the pathway. And there are 4 pathways that we could have gone. We could have had a de novo, a 510K, a special 510K, or a letter to file. And that's in decreasing order of difficulty. And because there is no predicate device, there was no device like this on the market with this indication, we, lucky us, got to go the de novo pathway, which is the longest pathway. It is also the most rigorous. You actually have to have clinical study data. And it's highly recommended that you go have a pre-submission meeting with FDA. And we didn't just have one, we had 2. In that pre-submission meeting, you discuss with them your clinical trial and your clinical reference standard. And one of the other beautiful things about concussion is that there is no gold standard reference for concussion. So how do you know whether or not somebody in the clinical study has a concussion? That was something that we had to hammer out with FDA before we did our study, and we also had to hammer out the actual clinical study design. We then conducted our pivotal study in not, just a few locations, but 6 study site locations, including the Mayo Clinic, University of Pennsylvania, Allegheny Medical Center, and a number of others. NYU was also included. And I'm actually proud to say that we included the Beaver Dam Community Hospital, which is a community of 15,000 people. So we had large and small institutions, both academic and non-academic. That clinical study took an entire year just to collect the data. We then analyzed it. We used biostatisticians that were formerly with the FDA. They came from NAMSA, which is the North American Medical Statisticians Association, and they went in with us to the submission meeting. We also then had a number of physicians write in support of our data, our clinical study, the authenticity of the data, the authenticity of the actual device, and all of that came together and resulted in a clearance on December 28th, 2018, a date that Uzma and I will never forget. We actually were seeing the Mary Poppins movie, I think, on that day. And so it was a very, very big day for us, and it was a very big day for brain injured patients. This is the first objective diagnostic to be cleared by FDA ever. And there still has not been a predicate that has followed us except for our own devices. So, I'm thrilled when people ask me if this is for real, because it could not possibly be more for real.
Good. And your reference to Beaver Dam, both of you are alums from Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, aren't you?
Yes.
Great, Wisconsin. A CPT code to generate payment has been created for this assessment. Was that a long process?
So that's a really interesting question because it should have been a long process, but we frankly did a lot of work before the AMA meeting. So that you go into the AMA meeting, you make an application for a CPT code, and then it's almost like sitting in front of Congress and testifying. There's a big U-shaped table with the members of each society represented at that table, and they can ask you whatever question they would like. And they get to ask about your application and everything. So Uzma was there, I was there, and then we had a reimbursement lawyer with us from Hogan Lovells, which is a firm out in Washington, D.C. And the 3 of us sat there and we were asked questions for about 15 minutes. The thing that happened at the AMA was that we had done an enormous amount of pre-work by talking with the societies, in particular the American College of Emergency Physicians, the American Academy of Neurosurgeons, and the American Academy of Ophthalmologists. And then the real action at that meeting happens during the intermission. And people could get a sense that we were really gaining some momentum around our code. And there was a lot of drama and a lot of politics, I'll just say. A lot of people actually, other societies wanted to have the code be a little bit more leaned towards them. There was a lot of argument about the language. At the end of the day, we did get the code. We got the language we wanted. The language was really important to us because it includes the words non-spatial calibration. And those words are specific to our technology and our procedure. And they also happen to be a part of one of our patents. So we're really happy with the CPT code that we got. So, and it usually does take a lot longer. It didn't take us that long after we got our FDA clearance to get it in the whole scheme of things.
Wow. Okay, we will be the first in Missouri to use an EyeBOX. Because we were so excited about this tool and what it can mean for concussed patients, I did invite some of my friends from other health systems from around the country to join us. From your experience, what does the ability to objectively assess a concussion mean for patients?
So first off is that if you can't make a diagnosis, you can't treat something. So I think what's critical for patients, so you have a patient who comes into the emergency department and they got hit in the head. And, you know, their objective in that visit is different from the emergency department objective. The emergency department objective, generally speaking, is to figure out if the patient needs neurosurgery. You know, does this patient need to be admitted? Do they possibly have a fatal hemorrhage? You know, are they going to need an intervention? The patient's objective is there anything wrong with me for which I will need follow-up care? And so this device actually technically can do both. It can tell both, you know, if a patient has serious injury, but we don't have an FDA clearance for that indication yet. But what it does do is it tells the patient, you know, what exactly is wrong and you know, how severe is the problem. And that, for patients, that's huge. That's massive peace of mind. So just so you understand where we are with FDA, right now is, oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Where we are with FDA right now is concussion, yes, no. But where we will be with this technology in the very near future is concussion, what kind? We will not only have a yes, no, but we will be able to tell you specifically what's wrong, like which areas of the brain are affected, so that you can plan treatments. And we're not there yet with FDA. We're hoping to be there very soon. We've made major progress towards clarifying that. Rosina, do you want to?
Yeah, that's a very good response. And we actually received an NIH grant to classify the nature of brain injury, particularly in the ocular motor realm. And that grant was done with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and Salus Medical Institute. And they've made a presentation at a meeting, and they are now in the process of submitting that paper for publication, and it's going through that process. So that should be published very shortly. And then we will also be submitting that to FDA simultaneously. So it's such a powerful tool from that perspective. From a human perspective, even during our clinical trial, we had patients come back and say, can I please take that test again, because I want to know if my score got better. The peace of mind that people get when they know that it's not just in their head, that something is still wrong, is immeasurable. We've had parents come up to us and say, we wish we'd had this test available to us even 2 weeks earlier, because Susie got a head injury. We didn't really know what was going on. Now we've had the test. We can still see that she's got a fairly high score. But 2 weeks ago, it would have been really nice to know, is she getting better? Is she plateaued? You know, what was actually happening 2 weeks ago? Uzma's had patients that have had low scores complain of injury in the neck area, and she treats them for neck injury, and they're cured. They didn't have a concussion. They had a neck injury. To differentiate that it's huge.
Yeah, being able to classify the nature of injury is really important in order to be able to treat the problem. So I think the way I sort of think of this technology, and, you know, obviously I'm biased because I'm the inventor, but it's sort of where EKG was in the 1950s. You know, you can use it for one indication right now, which is concussion, yes, no. But basically what this is a neuro-diagnostic that will help classify the nature of multiple problems in the future. And brain injury is where we're starting.
Yeah. And one of our philosophies is that brain injured patients deserve so much better than what they are getting right now. Right now, what they're getting is a subjective test. And this field deserves objectivity. It deserves clinical rigor. It deserves an FDA clearance. There is no reason for people to be wandering around using tests that have not even, you know, ever went and talked to the FDA. And so, you know, the entire field needs to be taken up a level.
Well, let's see how this thing works. Quincy is gonna, and we have our very
lab rat.
Yeah. Demo subject.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, I just did. And so, Quincy,
you ladies get to see the better part of me, the back of my head.
Yeah.
All right, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Quincy Markham. I'm the administrative intern here, and along with me is Dr. Stout, who's the orthopedic physician who's going to be helping overlook this. All right, so while I put in his data, they did mention, they already technically took half my speech anyway, So, as Uzma and Rosina had mentioned, it was the only FDA-approved objective tool for concussion diagnostics. And then Lori had mentioned it's the first one in Missouri. Technically, that's true, but it's also one of the very few ones in the Midwest alone. However, they did not mention that contributors to the EyeBOX innovation include Microsoft and the Green Bay Packers. Hopefully that doesn't cause any issues. So this test
Sorry
is
about
pretty
that, guys.
This test is pretty easy to administer. The test subject will put their head on the chin rest and watch about a 3.5-minute video.
Do I get to see the same one?
It's gonna be up to whatever the
Okay.
It's up to discretion. You'll be okay. So now I'm going to lock onto his pupils real quick so the EyeBOX knows where they are and they can track them. All right, Stafford, you ready?
Uh-huh.
All right, have fun with the video.
Thanks.
All right. While he's watching this, I will also like to mention, so another interesting thing with this is, a difference from this and the impact, is that the patient doesn't really need to speak or read English, so lucky for Stafford. And it can be done at patients as young as 5 years old. So now I was going to ask some questions to Dr. Stout to kind of get a better perspective on this from a physician's point of view. So what value do you think this EyeBOX will bring to the patient's lives?
Oh, it's incredible value. So in my world, this is critical because, you know, I see as an orthopedic sports medicine specialist, the question I get is, I got bumped in the head playing football, I have a bit of a headache, but I really want to play next week, or my coach is pressuring me to play next week. Do I have a concussion? Do I not have a concussion? And this is huge. An objective test that I can say, yes, you definitively have a concussion. It's not up to the athletic trainer who's administering the stat. It's not, can they manipulate the scores on their stat so they can play because they really want to play. It's an objective criteria that I can use in addition to the other subjective criteria that we've been using to identify, diagnose, help treat, help return to play. And that's what's going to be huge for me. I can retest them in a week and say, no, you're still not ready to get back on the football field. I mean, in the last decade or so, with the discovery of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and man, imagine if we had this EyeBOX 30 years ago for all these NFL athletes that are having terrible outcomes because their concussions were misdiagnosed, or they kept playing and kept getting repeat traumatic brain injuries. So it's a huge hot topic. It's going to be big, definitely for me, but for anyone that has any sort of traumatic brain injury.
Turn that down a little bit. I know Stafford's probably enjoying it, but all right. So, what do you think of this EyeBOX technology as an innovation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a game changer. Sure. As we said, as we alluded to, there's only subjective tests, and I applaud them for doing this because, man, that's got to be hard to get FDA approval for an objective, the first ever objective test, when all you can be measured by is subjective tests. So that's really difficult to do, and congratulations to you for doing that and allowing, providing this technology for us to use, because like I said, first ever objective criteria, going to be instrumental in, I fight coaches and parents and athletes that want to get back on the field immediately. And that sort of external pressure, when all you're relying on is subjective criteria, it's very easy to fudge and be like, yeah, I guess you did score okay on this, or it's easy for the athlete to cheat, as I already referenced. This I can print it out and say, no, you have a concussion, and you're still not ready to go back to play. I can show the coach, he has a diagnosed concussion, he cannot play, and it just protects the athletes, protects the patients.
Perfect. And last question, do you believe this is clinically validated technology?
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, it's very difficult because we're comparing it to subjective tests. So what is a concussion? There's no gold standard, as they said. So they're the first to do that. So it's going to evolve and get better. But looking at their FDA application, they have very good sensitivity for this, considering they were only comparing it to, the gold standard they had to compare it to was they had a concussion based on subjective criteria, and now we'll measure it with the EyeBOX. So very difficult to do, very promising results. I will utilize this a lot in identifying and treating concussions and all traumatic brain injuries.
Perfect. And you're good to go. That was great timing. So while Stafford has just finished his test, I would like you guys to take a look at those results. So that is what the EyeBOX is about to present to me of what's going on in Stafford's head.
It's empty.
Zero.
The boxes are all empty.
Actually lower this time. So you are seeing 5 rounds of eye movement. Basically, that was what the EyeBOX was tracking. On there, you will see a 0.69. Basically, a 0 to 10 is going to mean you don't have a concussion, and anything higher up to a 20 means you have a concussion. Stafford, this time you actually got a 0.48, so only more evidence that you do not have a concussion.
Yeah.
So congratulations there.
Actually, that's the amount of brain matter that I have in me.
But yeah, so
Tough crowd.
from using this, providers and athletic trainers should be able to refer their patients for this assessment by calling the centralized scheduling and having an evaluation scheduled to the orthopedic clinic where this thing will reside. All right. Thank you so much.
Okay, what board members, what questions do you have?
Dr. Stout alluded to that it was not only for concussions, but for traumatic brain injury. So could it conceivably be used for any kind of brain activity that's not normal going on? Could you see something, I guess I'm thinking like, for example, a tumor in your brain. Could you use EyeBOX?
Yeah, it's off-label for that indication. But basically, if someone has, if you divide the brain into 2 compartments, supratentorial and infratentorial, if someone has supratentorial mass effect, it's going to affect cranial nerve 3. So if someone has an acute stroke or a brain tumor that's causing edema, it's going to affect that cranial nerve. Cranial nerve 3 moves the pupil up and down. They're going to have decreased box height. If they have infratentorial mass effect, it's going to affect cranial nerve 6. So they're going to have decreased box width. And so we have other metrics that you can use to localize your problem. So if someone remember when, I think it was Hillary Clinton went into Cornell Hospital emergency department with she had a venous sinus thrombosis, and they initially thought that she had dehydration or something like that. She got sick when she was on the campaign trail. And I don't believe that they diagnosed it initially. They eventually got an MRI and they saw it and they realized what it was and they rehydrated her and she was okay. But could this have picked that up? Yes, certainly. Because, you're going to see when someone has edema in their posterior fossa, you're going to pick it up on eye tracking. We are not yet FDA cleared for those other indications.
Yeah, and actually there's a publication on the use of eye tracking and elevated intracranial pressure using this technology. It's on our website, and we've got a clinical study going on right now. Once again, Mayo Clinic is one of the sites, Johns Hopkins is the second site, and UPenn is the third site. So we've got a 3-site clinical study going on right now for elevated intracranial pressure, and once that's completed, we'll be submitting that to FDA. It's a good question. We'd like to get there with an FDA indication.
It would be useful for something like someone comes into the emergency room with a headache and you're wondering if you can safely do a lumbar puncture. Right now you have to image their brain before you can 100% say that they don't have mass effect in the brain. With this, you could, in theory, once we get FDA cleared for that indication, rule it out. The tricky part is technically that's marketing off label, so we're not allowed to sell for those indications at present.
How receptive was the NFL? You said you worked with the Green Bay Packers. How receptive was the NFL to this test?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We think of the NFL as our frenemies. So they know that they've got a problem. And depending on, the NFL is made up of an enormous range of people. Even the teams, the personalities are very different. So Mark Murphy, who's the president of the Packers, he'll talk about us every single opportunity he gets. You talk to him about any concussion test, he always comes back to this one. And no matter who he's talking to, Trevor Noah, doesn't matter. He'll talk about us. Others will say, we don't want that test in our locker room. because they know they've got a huge legal liability.
Right.
I will say that the Head, Neck, and Spine Committee knows us very well. They know Uzma in particular extremely well. They talk about us every single year in committee. There is a growing movement that they absolutely need to get more serious about this. And most recently, I don't know if you saw that there was a settlement and there was a lot of controversy about race norming. And this is a device that does not race norm. You can't, it does not care, what gender you are and what race you are. It doesn't even care how old you are or what language you speak. And there need to be, it's so clear that there need to be more objective concussion diagnostics. It does not even need to be our test. It's going to have to be something different than what they're doing currently. So asking if the NFL is receptive is like asking if, the entire United States is doing one thing. It just isn't.
Yeah.
The Green Bay Packers and Microsoft have a joint fund, and they've decided to invest in this technology. We are in conversations with the Head, Neck, and Spine Committee. We're in conversations with many of the physicians. The NFL will have something there eventually. They need to have something there eventually. It's just a matter of time.
I just wondered if more teams, like if the Green Bay Packers are on board, then, how do some of the other teams validate their decision not to have this tool? And I understand why there would be pressure to not have it.
Well, the Packers aren't actually using it. They just
they just were part
That's
of
right.
it.
They're not actually using it. They've invested in it.
Right.
And so they're not officially using it in, on the sideline or in Lambeau Stadium.
I think the major problem that we run into every single time, is the lawyers. And there are lawyers on both sides. There's the NFL lawyers, and then there's the NFL Players Association lawyers. And in order to get both sides to agree, the lawyers are going to have to agree first. And then we'll be in,
That's
so
where we always hit the roadblock. So we talk with a lot of the team doctors, and we talk with team owners, and then they send it into the lawyers, and that's where the roadblock happens. And, we just can't say too much more than that.
So other than the NFL, and I understand the drawbacks there, but what stops it from being elsewhere? What's holding it back from?
So there's a lot of money in sports, even at the Division I level and the NHL. I think a lot of this is simply just awareness at this point. We're such a small company, and we got our CPT code right before COVID, and then we stopped everything because it wasn't even appropriate to go talk to doctors during a time of national crisis. And so we stopped all of our sales and marketing efforts until about 4 weeks ago. And, right before COVID, the concussion clinic that's run by the Chicago Bears concussion physician and Blackhawks concussion physician, they adopted our technology. So, we know that it's going to happen. It's just going to take a little bit of time. And now that we're in a post-COVID world, hopefully, knock on wood, I think that we're going to be having more and more announcements of teams starting to use this.
And Rosina, we should also point out that we never set out to be a direct-to-consumer or direct-to-athlete device. When medical technology is invented, generally speaking, it's vetted in a medical center, in a medical setting by physicians who know how, that there's more to this than just concussion, yes, no, that there's some complexity and clinical correlation recommended. And so we didn't want to be a direct-to-consumer device right off the bat. We wanted to be validated and vetted by clinicians prior to going in that direction.
Yeah, every time we talk with a team, they send us to their physician, and the physicians are the ones that use it in their clinic. And that's honestly what FDA wants as well. They've put out warnings that, there is no consumer-based device that diagnoses concussion. And it has to be, done in a medical setting.
But outside the sports arena, like us, I mean, you're obviously starting to market that now, but is there anything holding that back at this point, or?
There's nothing holding that back other than we don't have a huge marketing budget. And, you know, we're a small company and we've just hired our first salespeople. I made the sale to Dr. Stout. I was the salesperson. That's it. The company is not much bigger than, 4 or 5 people at this point. And we're going to be doubling in the next 2 months, and then, most likely doubling again. So, we're just about to ramp up here. There's nothing really stopping us other than, getting the word out.
And also production rate. When we started, we had a slow production rate. We're able to ramp that up, but it's going to take time.
Yeah.
I apologize for asking such a crass question, but that's what I am. What does it cost per use to do this, and how long will that last us?
Yeah, that should last you for as long as you can use it. It's got basically we give it a warranty that if anything breaks, we'll replace it immediately. The cost, we've got a contract in place with you guys for $1,495 per month. That is not a per use. You can use it as many times as you like. Medicare and Medicaid are reimbursing on a per scan basis on average across the United States, $115. In Missouri, there is a special program. It's similar to a program in 11 other states for high school students that they are covered for concussion injury above and beyond what their private insurance may or may not pay. For $25,000 per injury, you certainly would not be charging them that for one scan. The average physician across the country that uses this is charging on a per scan basis $250 to $400 per scan. And then they're submitting that to private insurance. And in the states where there's this Headstrong program for high school students, it's covered above and beyond what the insurance will or not pay.
What's most likely to go wrong in there?
I don't know. Sometimes people don't plug it in. That really does happen. that has happened.
Handle that part, maybe.
Dr. Stout, you need to know.
Yeah, right. No, honestly, the beauty of it is its simplicity. You stick your head on a chin rest and you watch The Lion King go around the screen for 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you're done. And the interpretation is super easy. Give me a number with a cutoff. If you're above that number, you're concussed or traumatic brain injury. If you're below the number, you're not.
How do you choose the videos how did you decide on the videos that people watch? Were there certain?
We have a list of criteria that the video has to meet in order to make the clip. And so, like, no flashing lights, nothing that will be, so distracting that it's, not palatable. No blank spots in the video, that type of thing. So we've got a whole list of criteria that we actually submitted to FDA, and every video clip has to meet that criteria.
Didn't you first start out with Shakira, Hips Don't Lie?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's Uzma. That's Uzma in the research phase.
In the research phase, we didn't have to worry about copyright because we weren't using it for commercial purposes. Now it's a little different, so we have to pay attention to that, unfortunately. Yeah. We used a lot of when we started out, it was Shakira, Lady Gaga, Madonna. We used a lot of
music videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't use anything in its entirety right now.
Yeah. What's the lower limit on age for this?
So the FDA label is 5 years old at the lower limit. The lowest age group that's ever been actually tested is 3 years old. And the way you test a 3 years old person is to put them in the mother's lap and have them, put their head in the device. And if you put the Lion King on, they're usually fine.
So this is for recently concussed or possibly concussed people, not ones that have happened maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
Right. So the FDA label is within 1 week of injury. I would say that even within 2 weeks of injury, you're going to be fine. We are now doing a clinical study to expand that to within 9 weeks of injury. And then we've actually tested people out to 2 years, and we've got some research on that age group. Those would be other metrics that would not appear on that report that you've seen. That I think you've got a printout of the report. I think there's 4 metrics on that report plus the box score. We actually have 220 metrics, and then those other metrics would highlight if there's other things going on in a post-concussive syndrome person.
Anything else?
Why us? How come we were so lucky to be able to receive?
I read Fast Company magazine,
Uh-huh.
and I actually was
You found
several
us.
months behind in my reading, and in September, I read the Innovation edition, and this was one of the top 100 innovative companies, and it was just one page, and I thought it was fascinating. The two sisters.
It really is very interesting. As a mother of an athlete, it is very interesting to me.
So I called Rick Langdon in Materials Management and said, could you find out more information about this? It took him a little bit to figure out how to get in contact, but then I think we first had contact in October, I think, well, and then we got slammed with COVID. So it kind of was put on hold. And then we get into March, and I think, hey, this would be a great project for Quincy. So that's how this all started.
I'm so happy that you were able to procure this device. That makes me want to go out and tell all my, athlete parents, oh my gosh, come to Sedalia because we've got this fantastic tool that you don't have access to.
Right.
So.
We already have that happening, actually.
Yes. In fact, I'm meeting with Marshall Athletic Directors this Friday. They heard about it at the chamber breakfast.
Yeah.
Advertising.
So, anything else before I let the sisters go?
We'll be your sales team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys are amazing. We should have recorded this session because you're pretty much picture perfect. So thank you so much.
Thanks for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Appreciate the demo.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
There's it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Yeah.